Greetings from Helsinki, from a vibrant, growing city. I didn't come here to talk only about architecture, although I do have some pictures of really quite fantastic work in the end of the presentation, but I also wanted to share, as it was said in the introduction, some of the philosophies of working in Helsinki, why we do things, with whom and how we do things. And I also thought to say a few words about education, building for education, but also principles regarding education. And certainly I will talk about libraries for the new Central Library Ode, but also what libraries in general do mean in Helsinki. And I also wanted to highlight somewhat the relationship between the central parts of the city and the suburban neighborhoods, that how we see these things in Helsinki. As it was said, my own background is in national politics. I used to be a member of Finnish Parliament for a long time, since 1999, and I also have been working in the city politics already from the early 2000s. And I was born in Helsinki. I have lived there all my life and written lots of poems for it as well. So in my current position, I can say that I work for a place that I do genuinely love and care for. My first picture is about the growth of the city. And I took it as a first picture because I think that the increase in population, the fact that we do have some 7,000 or 8,000 new inhabitants every year affects a lot what we do in Helsinki, and it also affects the atmosphere of the city. Helsinki's growth rate has been approximately 1.2% for already 10 years, and it seems to be continuing like that. I do think that it's a privilege to work for a city that is growing, because it tells that there is attractiveness, or that people are willing to choose the city. But of course, it also puts a burden or challenge to the city, because we must build housing for new people, we must invest in public infrastructure for the new people, so it means a lot of work. In this, we are really in a similar situation that many European capitals at the moment, and I think we do share the fact that in Stockholm, in Copenhagen, in Oslo, in Amsterdam, in Vienna, it's the central city of the capital region, and even the central parts of the central city that at the moment are growing. And something that was not so common before is that we do have more children in the city all the time and in the center of the city. Housing, if we think of what we are building, for what architects are designing at the moment, the majority of the projects are for housing. In the past 10 years, we have had the good situation that there are altogether 3 former harbor areas that were freed when we moved the city port to the very eastern part of the city, and that freed us 3 quite interesting and fairly large locations, good locations in the city. And those parts of the city, this picture is one of them, called Western Harbour, we have been in a growing pace building for past 10 years. I will say a few words later about the philosophy, how we mix different housing, and I could also say that although the production is, it's mainly fairly ordinary residential buildings, but there are still ways that we try to take care that it's of good quality, that the buildings are not complete copies of each other, but there is individual touch and design for all the housing that we do build in Helsinki. This picture, you can see how still the neighborhood is changing, and you can see the land masses being stored at the same time when new people are already living in living in the new residential area. Those are the courageous ones that do live in places where you will see a construction site for a fairly long time. This area is also what our host mentioned, a place where we have experimented a lot of things. It has been a testbed neighborhood, new neighborhood called Fish Harbor, Kalasatama, and there has been a project called Smart Kalasatama that has meant that we have piloted and tested almost everything imaginable in that neighborhood. We have done a lot of social innovation, but also then completely like technical things in order to be climate smart. There is a really big battery storage for electricity so that we can balance it. There is a good quality of energy efficiency in these buildings. There have been pilots for mobility as a service, but there also has been pilots to use an application where tired young mothers can chat to each other and help each other in their daily grievances and joys when they are spending time with their babies at home. So almost everything has been tried out. It has really been an experimental place. One thing that is also really important in Helsinki is that when we are building new neighborhoods or doing infill production in old neighborhoods, we are mixing different forms of housing, and it means that we are mixing also people with different backgrounds. So all the new neighborhoods that we are building, we build city-owned regulated rental housing. We do build or allow being built completely free market housing, both free market for ownership and free market rental. And we also do have some sort of mid-forms of housing cooperatives, co-owning housing, and also special projects for elderly people or student housing. And when each neighborhood consists of these different kind of projects, it also means that people with different economic background, different history in the city, different ethnic background will live in the same neighborhood, and eventually kids also will go to the same neighborhood school. And that has been a long-time principle in Helsinki, and I think that it has helped us to have a city where differences between suburbs and city center or more well-off neighborhoods are not so great than in some other European cities. Something that of course affects Helsinki is that we have not had such a long time with lots of immigration. At the moment we do have it, and it is more than half of our growth comes from people speaking different languages than Finnish or Swedish. And at the moment the population, the foreign-born population is roughly there, a bit under 15%. As I said that it's really important for us to build an equal city where we do invest in education and where we want different neighborhoods to be diverse. At the moment, although we do have these former harbor areas that are large project areas, we still do a lot of infill construction and infill planning of existing areas, existing neighborhoods. This example is from one of the suburbs from that picture, you cannot see that it's really a classical 70s suburb with tall, white 70s suburban buildings, but the infill building that has been in that has been done in that neighborhood, we have wanted it to be different for more like perhaps then middle class families with children, so that the schools that already were there and were under threat of being emptied would have the young population again. A few words about the transport system of Helsinki and the challenges of transport system of a growing city. What we of course need all the time is investment, and the amount of investment and also the type of investment we do have, it's a continuing political discussion. Helsinki is a traditional public transport city. And we do have a really good share of sustainable modes of transport. Cycling, walking, and public transport make up altogether 78% of all journeys being made in Helsinki. So I think that we can be proud of that. But it also means that we have to sort of rush all the time in order to keep even that balance, since when you have more population, you need especially new public transport infra. At the moment, we are relying mostly in light rail investment. Those are the future projects that we will be building. In this picture, it's one of my favorite projects. It has been a lot of debated as well. It's a tram line called Crown Bridges, and it will connect a suburban island area that now has only one bridge to the mainland, with a second bridge straight to the city center. So it will create a good connection for a suburban area to the city center. And the thing that has been mostly debated with this bridge is that it will only be to the light rail, cycling and walking. No cars are allowed, or cars do not have space in these three bridges. And although the decision has been made already 2 years ago, it's still perhaps hard to swallow in the political debate for some people. But the idea is that when you offer really good, fast connections with public transport, then of course you can have a situation where more people also choose the public transport when it's really genuinely the fastest way to move in the city. And a car bridge would have also cost more than 100 million euros more, so that was one of the reasons as well. Then a few words about the population and about education. At the moment, roughly 15% of the population in Helsinki is children under 16 years old, and that is a figure that has been growing past 10 years. We did have times when there was really a tendency for young families to move out to other municipalities from Helsinki, to more suburban municipalities that relied more on people building their individual houses with their individual yards. But past 10 years, we could say that the sort of attraction of truly urban life has been calling families with children as well. And of course that has affected that now we are sort of completely like almost to the mouth, we are in water trying to swim and invest in more early education facilities and more schools all the time, because the number of children is growing so rapidly. The second thing that especially, well, it has been a tendency for some time, but this council period in our strategy, the participation and improvement of democratic processes has a really strong emphasis. And we are at the moment actually collecting from citizens of Helsinki ideas for participatory budgeting. This is the first round that we are doing it in this form. The system will go so that we will collect the ideas, then the civil service specialist will work with the citizens with the ideas so that they would be transformed or developed into projects that are easy to invest in. Then these ideas will be put to the vote, and then the best ideas will be financed. Altogether now the budget is 4.4 million euros for next year's spring. No one really knows how well it will go, but we have committed ourselves to improve this system so that eventually, if it doesn't work so well with this first round, then we will have it better later. But at least now it seems that there's a genuine interest and willingness from people's side to participate. I mentioned schools in different neighborhoods. And one could say that our idea of social equality is that the most important parts of a person's life where we as a city want to invest is early education and the primary education. And I think that that is something that we can be proud of in Finland altogether and in Helsinki especially. These are some pictures of school buildings that have been completed in Helsinki during past 3 years. And I do think that there is more and more consciousness of how teaching methods, the curriculum, and the ideas of teachers and the space serve each other, and that the good space, good school building is important part of good quality education. We do follow in the new areas, new neighborhoods that we are building, we do follow the principle of putting 1% of the construction cost more or less to public art. It has been something we have been doing already for some time, and these pictures, the bird is from Smart Kalasatama as well. So although some of the projects in Smart Kalasatama means applications and technology, but then the art can be quite traditional. And also, for example, in Kalasatama, the public art, it's not only permanent works of art in the neighborhood, but there are also theater projects and other exhibitions that are temporary, that are analyzed to have more like a permanent impact on people's thinking or minds, although they will not stay forever in the area. Then this autumn has been in Helsinki super special. Although I have been working for the city for a long time, I do not remember such autumn when we would have been opening two interesting architecturally good or superb quality, tempting and seemingly long-lasting cultural institutions and new buildings. Here you can see an outside picture and an inside picture of a new museum, Amos Rex. It's a private museum. It has been there already for a long time in Helsinki. It was a typical private museum that consisted of a private collection of Mr. Amos Andersson. He was a publisher and really a wealthy person who did collect art himself. And then the collection has had its own museum and lived throughout almost a century. And they decided they wanted to build a new museum for more different purposes, but also for contemporary art. And there you can see, this is the yard of the Amos Rex Museum. And the museum itself, it's underground. it's designed by JKMM Architects. The main designer was architect Asmo Jaaksi, who really did a tremendous job, I would say. And these hills or mysterious small slides, they are the roof of the museum itself. It's inside a functional pavilion that was originally built for Helsinki Olympics that did not take place because of the Second World War. One of the young architects doing the building that this yard is around was Viljo Revel. And then I think that this new museum has a perfect dialogue with the functionalist pavilion building. And what is the most remarkable thing is that since this yard was opened in late August this year, the citizens took it immediately to be something that they go around, and every time you go there, be it daytime, be it bit rainy, be it nighttime, you have youngsters skateboarding, bit younger people scooting, children playing around, even adults wanting to climb to the windows to see inside the museum. So it has been like architecture that has immediately taken people in to enjoy themselves. And the second picture is from the first exhibition that was done by the Japanese digital art group Team Lab. The exhibition is called Maskless, and that also has completely charmed the audience from really 3-year-olds to pensioners. So that has been a success. A second cultural building that I wanted to mention, it's already 2 years old. It's in completely different area, 50s, 60s suburb, where next year we will start building a transversal light rail that we do believe that this investment will lift that neighborhood up. And certainly this building called Maaloula House, Maaloula is the name of the place, it's a library, it's a folk school or adult education center, and also a youth house. So it combines these different public functions, and it is designed by K2S Architects. And it was also a project where the people living around that area participated in co-designing the building. Not that the architectural vision did not come from K2S Architects, it did, but they took the people together with them to think with the youngsters what kind of youth house they really would like to. And also the whole garden part has been something that people really actively participated as well. A second suburban project, these pictures are from architectural competition that we do organize quite often in Helsinki, and I'm happy with that because I think that with either competitions where you invite certain architects or sometimes even open competitions, we do find more quality and also new talent to projects. And this school that will also be a youth house and an early education facility, a kindergarten, it will be built to one of the suburban areas that have the biggest share of regulated city-owned rental housing. And economically, it's one of the lowest income areas in the city. And that was also a reason why we wanted to invest in that area and organize a competition in order to ensure that the school building would be something special. Also, I'm happy that you don't see the picture where there are the current school buildings, because they are really not in good shape. So it's really a time to actually provide the people of the area with something new. Well, libraries, I would say that the whole independence of Finland has developed hand in hand with libraries. Libraries have been centers for reading, for knowledge, for democratic sharing of information. Libraries are places where people do go to vote. Libraries in Finland have been places where during the time when internet was new, or when personal computers were something that people could not perhaps purchase for themselves, so the libraries had computers, and the library people were willing to teach elderly people how to actually use a personal computer. So libraries do mean a lot to us, and that's why we are all super happy that next week the new central library that is designed by Ala Architects, one of the main designers is Samuli Woolston. That was also a competition that Ala Architects, they were young office at that time, 2014 when they won the competition. It was certainly a project that helped them to establish themselves. It's a 3-story library where you have a lot of things happening. There are community functions, functions that people can come together. There are technological things, and then there are children's facilities for children. There will be cinema archives, theater, and the 3rd floor then will be like a silent area dedicated to books and traditional virtues of reading and enjoying reading. That is certainly a summer picture. Now it's when we will be opening the library, it will be 5th of December. We are expecting so many people to come to the opening that actually we will be using the whole area in front of the library to the opening. We wanted to have an opening that is not only to some exclusive people, but all the city is invited. There will be artworks, dance, different things, and then people can also go and take a first look at the library. And I'm sure that the city paid most of the investment, roughly 100 million euros, but the state of Finland participated because they wanted to celebrate the last year's 100 years of Finnish independence, and I'm sure that this place will be one of the most important places and hearts for the next 100 years of importance of culture, reading and education. Thank you.
We have a few minutes for a conversation. Anni has said that she would be interested in hearing your responses. I'm not sure if we have a microphone to wander around, but if you do want to ask a question, it's easier if you stand up, because it's quite difficult to see into the audience from here. But Anni, thank you for telling us about Helsinki. I think you're probably going to find your population is going to grow quicker, because I think lots of people will want to move there. I mean, you've got some very robust and very interesting policies, but could you cope with, let's say, double the population growth that you're projecting?
At the moment, it seems that coping with double the growth would be difficult for us, because in Finland, cities and municipalities do have a lot of responsibilities in providing the public services. So especially when we have a population growth that consists of children, and also since part of the population growth is immigrants and also people with refugee background, so we have to invest in education a lot. So growth means investment to us. But I think where we have, for example, housing production, our target is to build 6,000 housing units per year. We have not reached it yet. This year it will be probably like 5,200. But where we have been good, I think, has been like gradually improving the numbers. So in a way, I could think of having even a faster growth.
Sure. That 6,000, is that city-owned, social rented, or is that all forms of housing?
We do own the biggest share of social rental production. Not everything, but we are certainly the biggest producer of new regulated rental.
Sure, sure. Does anyone want to ask a question? Because we don't have a great deal of time, but sir. Could you hang on a minute? We do have a microphone.
There will come a microphone.
There is a microphone. Thank you.
I'm Karl Ankerman from the Dutch Financial Times. I have a question for you. What happened with the plans for the Guggenheim Helsinki?
Good question. Somewhat perhaps traumatic to the city as well. It was a really heated political debate around the Guggenheim Helsinki, and for reasons that this period of time would be too short to analyze, it did happen so that the cooperation of the Guggenheim Foundation and the Finnish partners did not manage to win the hearts of the citizens of Helsinki or the city council. Two different rounds. I think there were some odd parts of it, perhaps, that there was somehow a sort of prejudice that an international US-based institution. There were also a lot of economical debate on the terms of how that would be done. So in the end, in the first round, the city board voted it down, and in the second round, second proposal, city council voted it down. So that's what happened. And where we have been lucky, I think, is that the Amos Rex museum has been built in the aftermath of that discussion. And then there's also, in the planning phase, a project where we would, as a city, together with the state of Finland and together with two foundations, the Foundation for Architectural Museum and the Foundation of Design Museum, invest in completely new architect and design museum. So in the end, perhaps the Guggenheim discussion sort of has brought also some new openings, although that was somewhat also not completely fruitful as a whole, the discussion.
It's interesting, though, that you know, Helsinki as a city managed to cope with it, as you say, both the council and the population. And you've got, you know, in Amos Rex, you've got something which is a similar sort of facility, probably not as big as a Guggenheim would have been, but it's a facility for contemporary art as well as for showing more of an existing collection. But the point you raised there, which I'd like to push on a bit, and I can take some more questions from the audience in a moment, is about the participatory nature of how Helsinki is run. You know, that this is, you know, lots of cities, lots of countries across the world are struggling with how to get citizen or resident or inhabitant or you know, populace involvement, which is informed and constructive, as opposed to a sort of anarchic situation, which could quite easily become. Now, your mayor, Mr. Vapiori, sorry, I don't pronounce his name correctly, said to me in the summer that, you know, Finns tend to do what they're told. Is that true? And how does this participatory funding or democratic action work in practice?
Yeah, a broad question. I think that certainly there is this tradition in Finland that there is quite a lot in comparison to some other countries. My husband is half Italian, for example, and I sort of compare these countries, so I would say that in Finland there is much more respect to authority or to civil service or government all in all than, for example, in Italy. Then I think that there's a sort of a certain features of a mature society like Finland, that majority of people are fairly well off and have a lot of things. And the systems are quite developed. So there's also a lot of resistance to the change, since in a way there's quite a lot that people want to protect. So I think that also in city politics is something that is quite hard. For example, in transport policies, when a city was designed more for cars in earlier decades, so it's not so easy to redistribute the transport space to be differently run. And also I think that there's partly passiveness. People do vote in general election or in presidential election much more than in city local election, although the local government actually provides more of the concrete services that people have. And I think that participatory budgeting and other forms of more citizens' engagement are, of course, also directed for us to learn from those citizens that perhaps would not express themselves in voting because they wouldn't believe in such a sort of longish process. So if you really propose something to be invested in your own area and that would be delivered, perhaps that will sort of also be an investment to the functioning democracy and people's belief in democracy as well.
Do you have one more question? Time for one more? Yeah, madam.
Hi. I was actually wondering, so in the US we also have more urban housing being developed at the same time, and young families that are interested in moving into it. At the same time, there's not really the support to have public parks, for example, and so you have lots of apartment complexes and nowhere for the kids to play in. What's your approach around making sure and developing, partnerships? Because what these complexes might have, the developers, they'll do open spaces, but they are afraid to put playgrounds because then it restricts them from being able to build in the future for future development. And so how do you approach that?
Thank you. Really an important question, because I think we do have more and more research knowledge that actually people in urban areas also, they need parks, and even parks with some biodiversity. In Helsinki, I think we are in a special situation that we are really a big landowner. We own more than 65% of the land, and we also have a monopoly for zoning bylaws that we use, and we are used to use quite strictly. So our policy, I know from many examples that there are a lot of questions how to make private landowners that do a development area or project area, how do you resolve the maintenance of public areas or public parks? And we do have backing in legislation that the public parks, either we already own the land, or then we actually purchase the land for parks for ourselves. So it means that we are responsible, actually almost all of the parks or recreational areas, we are responsible for maintenance, but it also, of course, means that we do have a backing to actually demand them, even if there's a private development project. And I would say that people are also, citizens are, they wouldn't accept an area without good park facilities.
Thank you very much for a really interesting talk about how you transform a city for modern participatory democracy and citizenship. Fascinating. Thank you.
Thank you.